Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Titan, watching the stars through the main viewing screen. His ship had been patrolling the outer edges of human space for 3 months now, and nothing interesting had happened. The crew was getting restless, and Jake could feel it in the air. Navigation Officer Lisa Carter turned from her station with a puzzled look on her face. "Captain, I'm picking up some strange energy readings from the Kepler 442 system," she said while checking her instruments again. "The patterns don't match anything in our database." Jake walked over to her station and looked at the data flowing across her screen. The energy signatures were unlike anything he had seen before. They were too organized to be natural phenomena, but too alien to be human technology. Chief Engineer Ryan Brooks joined them at the navigation station. "Those readings are off the charts," Ryan said, scratching his head. "Whatever is generating that energy has power output levels we can only dream about." Tactical Officer Amy Watson looked up from her weapons console. "Captain, should I raise our defensive screens just in case?" Jake thought for a moment. First, contact protocols required caution but also demanded that they investigate any signs of alien intelligence. This could be the moment humanity had been preparing for since they first reached the stars. "Set course for the Kepler 442 system," Jake ordered. "But keep our weapons powered down. We're going in peaceful but ready." The USS Titan changed course and headed toward the unknown energy source. The journey took 18 hours, and the entire crew felt the tension building. Everyone knew they might be about to make history. When they finally arrived at the edge of the system, Jake couldn't believe what he was seeing. Floating in space near the fourth planet was a massive structure that dwarfed anything humans had ever built. It was easily the size of Earth's moon, but clearly artificial. Strange geometric patterns covered its surface, and lights pulsed along what appeared to be docking bays and weapon emplacements. "My God," Lisa whispered from her station. "That thing must house millions of beings." Ryan was running scans as fast as his equipment would allow. "Captain, the technology readings are incredible. Their power generation systems are at least 1,000 years ahead of ours. And those aren't just lights on the surface. I'm detecting weapon systems that could destroy our ship with a single shot." Jake felt his heart racing but kept his voice calm. "Open a communication channel on all frequencies. Let's try to make contact." Amy worked at her console for several minutes before shaking her head. "I'm trying every frequency we know but getting no response. Wait, something's happening." Suddenly, the main screen filled with the image of an alien face. The being had pale blue skin, large black eyes, and what appeared to be gills along its neck. When it spoke, its voice was cold and mechanical. "Primitive vessel. You have entered Zephyrian collective space without permission. State your purpose or be destroyed." Jake stepped forward and tried to project confidence he didn't feel. "I am Captain Jake Morrison of the human vessel USS Titan. We come in peace, seeking friendly contact with your people." The alien's expression didn't change. "Humans, we have detected your primitive expansion into 12 systems. You will cease all expansion immediately and submit to collective authority. Your technology is laughable, and your species shows dangerous aggressive tendencies." "We're not aggressive," Jake replied. "We're explorers seeking knowledge and friendship among the stars." "Your warships say otherwise," the alien responded. "You build weapons instead of focusing on science and philosophy like civilized species. This marks you as a threat to galactic peace." Before Jake could respond, Amy Watson's console lit up with warnings. "Captain, multiple ships are launching from that station. 20 vessels heading our way, and their weapons are charging." Jake had seconds to make a decision that could determine humanity's future. "All power to engines. Get us out of here now." The USS Titan spun around and accelerated away from the alien station as fast as its engines could manage. Energy beams lanced through the space where they had been floating just moments before. The alien ships were fast, but the USS Titan had been designed for long-range missions and had excellent engines. "They're gaining on us," Amy reported while watching her tactical display. "Their ships are definitely faster than ours." Ryan was pushing the engines beyond their normal limits. "I can give you maybe 10 more minutes of this speed before we risk a core breach." "That's enough," Jake said while studying the star charts. Lisa, plot a course for the nearest asteroid field. We'll lose them in there. The USS Titan dove into a dense asteroid field with the alien ships close behind. Jake used every trick he had learned in 20 years of military service. The human ship twisted and turned between the floating rocks while the alien vessels struggled to follow. Their superior technology worked against them in the chaotic environment because their ships were designed for open space combat. After an hour of dangerous flying, the alien ships gave up the chase and returned to their station. The USS Titan had escaped, but everyone on board knew their lives had just changed forever. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe, and their new neighbors were not friendly. Did we get any useful data during the encounter? Jake asked while slumping into his captain's chair. Ryan nodded grimly. I managed to record everything about their ships and weapons. The good news is their technology follows the same basic, physical laws as ours. The bad news is they're so far ahead of us it's not even funny. Lisa was already plotting a course back to Earth. Captain, it'll take us 6 weeks to reach home base. Should I send a faster message probe ahead to warn them? Do it, Jake ordered. Earth needs to know what's coming. We just met the neighbors and they're not happy to see us. As the USS Titan began its long journey home, Jake stared out at the stars and wondered if humanity's expansion into space had been a terrible mistake. The galaxy was much more dangerous than anyone had imagined, and Earth's small fleet of warships might not be enough to protect them from what was coming. The age of human innocence among the stars was over, and Jake Morrison had just fired the opening shot in what might become humanity's final war. Admiral Henry Collins sat at the head of the War Council table in Earth's Central Command bunker, deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. The room was packed with the highest-ranking military officers and government officials on Earth. Everyone was studying the data that Captain Morrison had brought back from his encounter with the alien collective. Intelligence Officer Karen Phillips stood at the front of the room pointing to images on the main display screen. Based on our analysis of the USS Titan's recordings, we're dealing with a civilization that spans hundreds of star systems. Their technology is roughly 1,000 years more advanced than ours in every category we can measure. Defense Secretary Robert King leaned forward in his chair. How many ships are we talking about? Karen switched to a new set of images showing the massive alien space station. Conservative estimates suggest they have at least 10,000 warships scattered across their territory. Each one appears to be more powerful than our best battleship. A uncomfortable silence filled the room as everyone absorbed the implications. Earth's entire defense fleet consisted of only 300 ships, and most of those were converted cargo vessels with basic weapons. Admiral Collins stood up and walked to the display. What about their weaknesses? Every military force has vulnerabilities. Karen hesitated before answering. Sir, we haven't identified any obvious weaknesses yet. Their ships are faster, better armed, and more heavily defended than ours. The only advantage we might have is that they seem to follow very predictable tactical patterns. What do you mean by predictable? Asked General Patricia Cross, who commanded Earth's ground forces. Their ships moved in perfect formations during the encounter with Captain Morrison. Very precise and organized, but not very flexible. It's like they've been fighting the same way for centuries without adapting. Before anyone could respond to this observation, an aide rushed into the room and whispered something urgent into Admiral Collins's ear. The Admiral's face went pale as he listened to the message. Ladies and gentlemen, we just received a transmission from the alien collective. It's addressed to all of humanity. The main screen switched to show the same pale blue alien that Captain Morrison had encountered. Its black eyes seemed to stare directly at each person in the room as it began to speak in its cold, mechanical voice. Humans of Earth, I am High Commander Zexthai of the Zephyrian Collective. Your species has been evaluated and found to be a threat to galactic stability. You build weapons of war instead of focusing on peaceful development like civilized races. The alien paused and the image shifted to show star charts highlighting human colonies. You have spread your violent culture to 12 systems, in defiance of natural order. This expansion must cease immediately. Admiral Collins felt his hands clench into fists but forced himself to remain calm as the alien continued its ultimatum. You have one solar rotation to consider our terms. Surrender your weapons, abandon all colonies beyond your home system, and submit to collective guidance. If you refuse, we will demonstrate our power by destroying your colony at New Austin. Every living human in that system will die as an example to your species. The transmission ended and the room erupted in angry voices. Everyone was talking at once until Admiral Collins slammed his hand on the table, demanding silence. "One day," he said grimly. "They're giving us 1 day to surrender, or they'll massacre 50,000 colonists at New Austin." General Cross stood, up with fire in her eyes. "We can't let them slaughter innocent civilians, but we also can't surrender our freedom to alien overlords." Karen Phillips was studying her data tablets frantically. "Admiral, New Austin is 6 days away by our fastest ships. Even if we sent the entire fleet right now, we couldn't reach them in time to evacuate the colony." "What about a message probe?" asked Defense Secretary King. "We could warn them to evacuate." "The colony doesn't have enough transport ships to evacuate 50,000 people," Admiral Collins replied. "And even if they did, where would they go? The aliens seem to know the location of every human settlement." While the leadership argued about impossible choices, Captain Morrison sat quietly in the corner reviewing the tactical data from his encounter. He had been studying the alien ship movements and weapon patterns for weeks during his journey back to Earth. "Admiral," Jake said, standing up to address the room, "I think I might have an idea." Everyone turned to look at the young captain who had made first contact with humanity's greatest threat. "The aliens expect us to fight like every other species they've conquered. Straight ahead battles with organized fleets meeting in open space." "But what if we don't play by their rules?" General Cross raised an eyebrow. "What are you suggesting, Captain?" "Their ships are designed for fighting other advanced civilizations using similar technology and tactics. They've probably been using the same battle strategies for hundreds of years. But humans have always been good at improvising and adapting." Admiral Collins could see where the young captain was heading. "You want to set a trap?" "Exactly, sir. Let them come to New Austin expecting to find helpless colonists and a token defense force. Instead, we give them something they've never seen before." Karen Phillips looked up from her tactical computers. "Captain, even with surprise on our side, we're still outnumbered and outgunned by impossible margins." Jake smiled grimly. "Then we don't fight them ship to ship. We use the environment against them. Turn the entire system into a battlefield where their advantages become disadvantages." The room fell silent as everyone considered the desperate plan taking shape. It was risky beyond belief and would require perfect timing and incredible luck. But it was the only chance they had to save New Austin and send a message to the aliens that humanity wouldn't go down without a fight. "Admiral," Collins looked around the room at his officers and advisors. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have 18 hours to plan the impossible. Captain Morrison, you'll have command of the operation since you know these aliens better than anyone." As the meeting broke up and people rushed to their stations, Jake Morrison stared at the star chart showing New Austin's location. In 6 days, he would either save 50,000 lives and show the galaxy that humans were not helpless prey, or he would lead humanity's fleet to destruction in a battle they could not win. Captain Jake Morrison stood in the cargo bay of the USS Titan, watching Chief Engineer Ryan Brooks and Dr. Simon Hayes work frantically on their desperate modification project. They had taken 6 heavy cargo freighters and were turning them into the largest kinetic weapons humanity had ever built. "The fusion drives are installed and ready," Ryan reported while wiping sweat from his forehead. "Each ship will accelerate to 0.7 light speed before impact. At that velocity, even a small mass becomes devastating." Dr. Hayes looked up from his calculations. "The problem is guidance systems. These cargo ships weren't designed for precision flying at those speeds. We'll only get one shot at this." Jake nodded while studying the tactical display showing the New Austin system. "That's why we're using multiple vectors. The aliens won't be expecting kinetic attacks and they definitely won't expect them from 6 different directions." Lieutenant Commander Beth Turner joined them in the cargo bay. Her team had spent the last 4 days planting quantum resonance devices throughout the asteroid fields surrounding New Austin's 4th planet. Each device was no bigger than a briefcase, but packed with enough explosive power to shatter a mountain. "Asteroid field is ready, Captain," Beth reported. We've got 200 devices planted in strategic locations. When they detonate, the entire field will become a debris storm moving at high velocity. What about the timing? Jake asked. Dr. Hayes has synchronized everything to our ship's computers. The resonance devices will trigger 30 seconds after the kinetic impacts. That should give us maximum chaos in their formations. Jake looked around at his team of engineers, scientists, and soldiers. They were about to attempt something that violated every rule of space warfare. Instead of meeting the enemy with organized battle lines and superior firepower, they were turning the entire system into an improvised weapon. Remember, everyone, we only get one chance at this. If the timing is off by even a few seconds, their point defense systems will destroy our kinetic projectiles before impact. The plan required perfect coordination across multiple ships and vast distances. The cargo vessels had been launched 3 days ago and were now coasting toward their target positions using minimal power to avoid detection. The USS Titan and 5 other warships were hidden in the outer system, waiting for the alien fleet to arrive. Right on schedule, space near New Austin Colony began to shimmer as 25 alien warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel. The Zephyrian vessels moved in perfect formation toward the defenseless human settlement. Their weapons began charging for what they expected to be a simple extermination mission. "Enemy fleet has arrived," reported Amy Watson from her tactical station. 25 ships, including 3 heavy cruisers. They're moving in standard attack formation toward the colony. Jake felt his heart pounding as he watched the alien ships approach their target. Everything depended on the aliens following their predictable patterns and not detecting the hidden kinetic projectiles until it was too late. "All ships, this is Morrison. Execute in 30 seconds on my mark." The 6 cargo freighters suddenly ignited their fusion drives and accelerated toward the alien fleet from different angles. At the same time, the quantum resonance devices in the asteroid field began their synchronized detonation sequence. High Commander Zexthai stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the primitive human colony grow larger on his viewing screen. The settlement was completely defenseless, just as their intelligence had predicted. This demonstration of collective power would end human expansion once and for all. "Commander, I'm detecting unusual energy signatures," reported his sensor operator. "Multiple objects approaching at high velocity from various vectors." Zexthai turned to examine the tactical display. 6 small vessels were racing toward his fleet at incredible speed. Their primitive fusion drives were pushed far beyond safe operating limits. "Kinetic projectiles," he said with amusement. "The humans think they can damage our shields with simple mass impacts, activate point defense systems, and destroy those pathetic missiles." The collective warships began firing their energy weapons at the approaching cargo vessels. Several of the human ships were destroyed in brilliant explosions, but 3 managed to survive the defensive fire. At 0.7 light speed, even a cargo freighter became a devastating weapon. The first kinetic impact struck the heavy cruiser, Dominant Harmony amidships. The alien vessel's energy shields flared and died under the massive kinetic energy transfer. The cargo ship's hull vaporized on impact, but its momentum carried through the cruiser's armor like it was tissue paper. 2 more impacts followed within seconds as the remaining kinetic projectiles found their targets. The alien formation scattered in confusion as their ships tried to avoid the debris clouds from their destroyed vessels. "What kind of insane species uses their own ships as weapons?" demanded Zexthai, as his tactical officer reported severe damage to the fleet. Before anyone could answer, the asteroid field around them exploded into motion. 200 quantum charges detonated simultaneously, turning millions of tons of rock into high-velocity projectiles. The debris storm engulfed the alien fleet from all directions. Jake Morrison watched from the USS Titan as the trap closed around the enemy ships. The aliens had expected a simple target practice against defenseless colonists. Instead, they found themselves caught in a maelstrom of debris and kinetic energy that their advanced technology couldn't overcome. "All human ships, move in and finish them," Jake ordered over the communication system. The 6 remaining human warships emerged from hiding and attacked the scattered alien vessels. The Zephyrian ships were individually more powerful, but they were damaged, separated, and completely unprepared for the chaotic battle environment the humans had created. Within 2 hours, the entire alien demonstration fleet had been destroyed. Not a single Zephyrian vessel escaped to report what had happened at New Austin. The human colonists watched from their underground shelters as debris from 25 alien warships rained down on their planet. Jake stood on his bridge looking at the tactical display showing the aftermath of the battle. They had won an impossible victory, but he knew this was just the beginning. The collective would eventually realize their demonstration fleet had been destroyed, and they would send a much larger force to investigate. "Captain," reported Lisa Carter from her navigation station, "we're receiving transmissions from colonies throughout human space. Word of our victory is spreading fast." "Good," Jake replied grimly. "Let every human in the galaxy know that we're not helpless prey. But also make sure they understand this was just the first battle in what's going to be a very long war." Ryan Brooks joined Jake at the main viewing screen as they watched the last pieces of alien wreckage burn up in New Austin's atmosphere. "Think they'll underestimate us again?" Jake shook his head slowly. "No. Next time they'll come with everything they have. We better be ready." News of the human victory at New Austin spread across the galaxy like wildfire through subspace communication networks. On a dozen different worlds, enslaved alien species huddled around illegal receivers listening to the impossible reports. For the first time in 3 centuries, someone had defeated the Zephyrian collective in open battle. On the water world of Andromeda's Prime, the Philosophical Andromedan Council gathered in their floating city to discuss the implications. Elder Quintel raised his webbed hands for silence as the assembly debated humanity's shocking victory. "The recordings are clear," he said in his melodious voice. "These humans destroyed an entire collective fleet using improvised weapons and unconventional tactics. They turned their own cargo vessels into kinetic projectiles." Council member Velandra shook her head in amazement. "No species has ever conceived of such desperate measures. They used their ships like ancient artillery shells." "Desperate, perhaps, but effective," observed Elder Quintel. "The collective has ruled through technological superiority for so long they forgot that warfare is about more than advanced weapons." Similar discussions were taking place throughout collective space. The warrior merchants of the Rigel Consortium met in secret aboard their trading vessels, passing encrypted messages about the human tactics. The insectoid hive clusters communicated through pheromone networks that the collective couldn't monitor. But nowhere was the reaction stronger than in the collective's own capital system. High Commander Zexthai stood before the Supreme Council in the great crystalline chamber at the heart of their empire. The 7 most powerful beings in the galaxy sat in judgment of his failure. 25 warships destroyed, intoned Supreme Leader Kethmar from her position at the center of the council chamber. An entire demonstration fleet eliminated by a primitive species with inferior technology. Zexthai kept his expression neutral despite the humiliation burning inside him. "The humans employed tactics we had never encountered before. They sacrificed their own vessels as weapons and turned environmental hazards into battlefield advantages." "Excuses," hissed Council Member Thexnall. "You were defeated by primitives who have barely learned to leave their home system." Chief Strategist. Quindal rose from his seat and approached the tactical displays showing the battle recordings. "Perhaps we should examine how they achieved this victory before dismissing it as luck." The assembled council watched in silence as the holographic display showed the human kinetic attack and the asteroid field explosions. Even the most arrogant collective leaders had to admit the tactical innovation was impressive. "They think differently than any species we have encountered," Quindal continued. "Every civilized race follows predictable patterns in warfare. Formation flying, shield-to-shield combat, victory through superior technology. But these humans seem to treat war as a creative exercise." Supreme Leader Kethmar leaned forward in her floating chair. "Are you suggesting that primitive humans pose a real threat to our empire?" "I'm suggesting that we may have underestimated them," Quindal replied carefully. "Our initial assessment focused on their technological limitations. We didn't consider their tactical flexibility. Meanwhile, on Earth, Captain Jake Morrison was meeting with representatives from alien resistance groups who had somehow managed to establish secret contact with humanity. The meeting took place in a heavily shielded conference room deep within the Rocky Mountains. The first representative was Ambassador Velcris, an Andromedan who had escaped from collective space in a stolen trading vessel. His pale blue skin and large eyes made him appear fragile, but his voice carried the weight of desperate hope. Captain Morrison, your victory at New Austin has inspired resistance movements throughout the galaxy. Species that have been enslaved for centuries are beginning to believe that freedom is possible. The second representative was even more surprising. Commander Grixtar of the Rigel Consortium was a massive humanoid covered in metallic scales. His people had been conquered 50 years ago, but their warrior culture had never fully submitted to collective rule. We can provide intelligence about collective fleet movements and base locations. Grixtar rumbled in his deep voice. In exchange, we need proof that humans can continue to defeat them in battle. Jake looked across the table at Defense Minister Patricia Cross and Admiral Collins. The weight of galactic expectations was settling on humanity's shoulders. We're honored by your faith in us, Jake said carefully. But you need to understand that we're still vastly outnumbered and outgunned. Our victory at New Austin succeeded because we caught them by surprise. Ambassador Velcris nodded sadly. We understand the odds, Captain. But for 300 years, no one has even tried to resist. The collective rules through fear and the certainty of their own superiority. You have shattered that certainty. The meeting was interrupted by an urgent message from Earth's deep space monitoring stations. Admiral Collins read the report with growing alarm before addressing the room. The collective has mobilized their primary battle fleet. 200 warships, under the command of War Master Thecamar, are heading directly for Earth. They're not taking any chances this time. Commander Grixtar's metallic scales shifted color as he processed this information. Thecmar is their most feared military leader. He has conquered 17 different species and never lost a major battle. How long do we have? Asked Jake. 3 weeks, Admiral Collins replied grimly. They're coming straight here instead of sending another demonstration force. Ambassador Velcris stood up from the conference table with determination in his large eyes. Then we must act quickly. The resistance movements throughout the galaxy are ready to coordinate strikes against collective supply lines and communication networks. What good will that do against 200 warships? Asked Minister Cross. It will force them to divide their attention, Commander Grixtar explained. Right now, they're focused entirely on destroying Earth. If rebellions break out across their empire, they'll have to pull ships away from the attack fleet. Jake studied the star charts showing collective territory and human space. The plan taking shape was incredibly risky, but it might be humanity's only chance for survival. We'll need to coordinate everything perfectly, he said. The galaxy-wide rebellion has to start exactly when the collective fleet arrives at Earth. That will give us maximum chaos and confusion in their ranks. As the meeting broke up and the alien representatives prepared to return to their hidden bases, Jake Morrison realized that humanity was no longer fighting for just their own survival. They had become the symbol of hope for oppressed species throughout the galaxy. The coming battle at Earth would determine not just humanity's fate, but whether the age of collective domination would continue, or if a new era of galactic freedom could begin. War Master Thecmar stood on the command bridge of his flagship Eternal Dominance, watching the blue and green world of Earth grow larger on his viewing screen. Behind him stretched the largest battle fleet in collective history. 200 of their most powerful warships arranged in perfect attack formations that had conquered dozens of star systems. Intelligence reports confirm minimal human defenses, his tactical officer reported. 57 primitive warships detected in Earth orbit. Their technology remains inferior to our standards. Thecamar nodded with satisfaction. The humiliating defeat at New Austin would be avenged today. These humans had gotten lucky once with their desperate tactics, but no amount of creativity could overcome such overwhelming numerical and technological superiority. Begin the attack, he commanded. I want this planet reduced to radioactive debris within 6 hours. But as the collective fleet moved into Earth's solar system, Captain Jake Morrison was putting the final touches on the most audacious military plan in human history. He stood in the command center on Earth's moon, watching teams of engineers make last-minute adjustments to the massive fusion drives that now covered the lunar surface. All fusion drives are online and synchronized, reported Chief Engineer Ryan Brooks over the communication link. We have enough power to move Luna at point 4 light speed on your command. Dr. Helen Park looked up from her physics calculations with a mixture of excitement and terror. Jake, this is completely insane. No one has ever used a planetary body as a kinetic weapon before. That's exactly why it'll work, Jake replied while studying the tactical displays. They expect us to meet them in traditional fleet combat. Instead, we're going to throw the moon at them. The plan had taken 3 weeks of non-stop work by every engineer and scientist on Earth. They had installed thousands of fusion drives across the moon's surface and hollowed out sections of the lunar interior to house guidance systems and structural reinforcements. The entire satellite had been converted into the largest projectile ever created. Captain Noah Wright commanded the USS Liberty from Earth orbit, while Captain Rachel Stone led the USS Defiance near Mars. The human fleet was spread throughout the solar system, ready to coordinate the most desperate gamble in military history. Collective fleet is entering effective weapons range, reported Amy Watson from her position aboard the USS Titan. They're maintaining standard attack formation. Jake took a deep breath and opened communication channels to every human ship in the system. All vessels, this is Morrison. Execute Operation Moonshot in 30 seconds. Across the solar system, resistance groups launched coordinated attacks on collective installations exactly as planned. Ambassador Velcris led Andromedan rebels in strikes against supply depots while Commander Grixtar's warriors attacked communication relays. The galaxy-wide rebellion had begun. Warmaster Thecamar received the first reports of rebellion just as his fleet entered Earth's defensive perimeter. His communications officer looked confused as messages flooded in from throughout collective space. Sir, we're receiving distress calls from 17 different systems. Coordinated attacks on our bases and supply lines. Impossible, Thecamar growled. The conquered species lacked the coordination for such widespread rebellion. Before he could process this development further, his sensor operator screamed a warning that chilled his blood. Warmaster, Earth's moon is moving. It's accelerating, directly toward our formation. Thecamar spun to stare at his tactical display in disbelief. The massive celestial body was indeed moving, powered by thousands of fusion drives that turned its entire surface into a blazing constellation of artificial suns. They're using their moon as a weapon, whispered his tactical officer in horror. The psychological impact on the collective fleet was devastating. In 300 years of conquest, no species had ever conceived of anything so audacious. The sight of an entire moon racing toward them at tremendous velocity shattered their confidence in their own superiority. All ships scatter, ordered. Thecamar, as panic began to grip his bridge crew. Avoid the projectile. But Luna wasn't just a simple kinetic weapon. As it approached the collective fleet, sections of the moon began breaking away in precisely calculated fragments. Each piece was guided by its own navigation system toward specific enemy vessels. The largest fragment struck Thecmar's flagship, dead center. The eternal dominance, pride of the collective fleet, was vaporized instantly by the incredible kinetic energy. Dozens of other collective ships suffered the same fate as lunar debris traveling at point 4 light speed tore through their formations. Captain Morrison watched from the USS Titan as the Battle of Earth turned into a rout. The surviving collective vessels were scattered and demoralized, their perfect formations shattered by the most unconventional attack in galactic history. All human ships, pursue and destroy, Jake ordered. Don't let them regroup. What followed was less a battle than a cleanup operation. The human fleet, supported by rebel ships that had secretly gathered in Earth's outer system, systematically hunted down the surviving collective vessels. Within 12 hours, the most powerful battle fleet in galactic history had been completely destroyed. But the real victory was happening across the galaxy. News of the Battle of Earth spread through subspace networks faster than any military communication. On world after world, enslaved species rose up against their collective overlords. The empire that had dominated the galaxy for 3 centuries began collapsing from within. 6 months later, Jake Morrison stood in the newly constructed Galactic Alliance headquarters orbiting Earth. Representatives from dozens of formerly enslaved species had gathered to establish a new form of galactic government based on mutual respect rather than domination. Ambassador Velcris approached Jake with gratitude shining in his large eyes. Admiral Morrison, the Andromedan people owe you a debt that can never be repaid. Jake had been promoted to admiral after the battle, but the title still felt strange to him. We all fought for freedom, Ambassador. Humans just happened to fire. The first shot. Commander Grixtar joined them near the large viewing port overlooking Earth. His metallic scales had shifted to colors that Jake had learned indicated happiness among his people. The Rigel Consortium would like to propose a joint exploration mission beyond the galaxy's rim, Grixtar announced. Our combined technologies could open new frontiers for all species. Jake smiled as he looked out at the stars. Humanity had gone from being unknown primitives to reluctant leaders of galactic civilization in less than a year. The future held challenges and opportunities that no one could predict. I think that sounds like an excellent idea, Jake replied. It's time for all of us to explore what lies beyond the known galaxy. The USS Titan, newly refitted with technology shared by Alliance species, prepared for humanity's first mission as leaders rather than survivors. As the ship departed Earth's solar system, Jake Morrison reflected on how far they had all come. The galaxy was no longer ruled by fear and domination. Instead, it was guided by hope and the endless human drive to explore the unknown. War Master Thekmar and the Collective's Age of Terror were history. In their place rose a new era where diversity of thought and tactical innovation were valued, above technological superiority. Humanity had taught the galaxy that sometimes the most primitive species could change everything by refusing to accept that the impossible was truly impossible.